Drew Allar played the worst game of the season, and I don't even know if the wide receivers knew there was a game going on.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Had the live post-game reaction, but now this game has settled in. Notre Dame beating Penn State 27-24. We're going to talk about all of it. Drew Allar, the wide receivers or lack thereof, James Franklin losing another big game. Coordinators, do they bear responsibility? Tom Allen, Andy Kotelnicki. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, or lack thereof, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. I'm sure Notre Dame fans that find this episode have plenty to say, so I am all for it here because I thought that Drew Allar was going to be a difference maker in this game, and well, he certainly was a difference maker. This is going to be a rant. I usually have notes and a guide for this, but this is my genuine reaction to the game. And Drew Allar had by far the worst game of his career, definitely since Ohio State 2023. There was not a play, there was not a pass, there was not a decision. Drew Allar maybe had one or two, maybe max three good plays where Penn State was able to sustain a drive. It's the one play where he ran for a first down, picked it up on a crucial third down to keep the drive alive. He dropped one into the breadbasket to Tyler Warren. But those are really the only plays that I can think of. The other times, they were just inaccurate passes, poor decisions, the game-losing interception when he knew he was not supposed to make that throw. He was trying to basically force an incompletion, and somehow it ended up into the arms of a Notre Dame defensive back. It got even worse. I don't even know how you try to justify it. Just say you made a bad read. But Allar played his worst game possible, and it was strange because there really weren't a lot of signs of this all season long. Drew Allar, at least for the most part, had put those demons behind him, and they showed up in the biggest game of the season. But hindsight's 2020, so it does make sense. We know that Drew Allar's mentality was very shaky in 2023, but you get a new offensive coordinator, and Andy Kotelnicki. The offense is showing signs of life. Yes, we'll talk about the wide receivers in a moment. It still has its weaknesses, but offensive line's better. The running backs are better. Allar has taken a major step forward. Andy Kotelnicki seems to have resolved a lot of these issues. And then the ones that were personally affecting Drew Allar showed up in this game, and that's what a top 5 defense can do for you. When elite defenses are elite for a reason. They forced mistakes from Drew Allar, but I also still have to side with the fact that they were certainly self-inflicted. Allar was not setting his feet. Allar looked uncomfortable the entirety of the game. And who bears responsibility in all of that? I mean, he's still a 20-year-old player. I don't know how much I want to dunk on Drew Allar here. Does he bear responsibility? Yes. Does he bear a lot of the responsibility? Kind of. He makes one more play. One play, because Penn State across the board, if we're going to go through it. But aside from the wide receivers that were the other glaring issue here, Andy Kotelnicki called a great game. Tom Allen called a great game. I know Notre Dame scored 27 points, but that was a Notre Dame team that does so well offensively, and Tom Allen made it so difficult for them to get anything going. If Allar hits Singleton in the flat, touchdown. That's the difference. That's 4 points. 4 is greater than 3. Penn State wins hypothetically 28-27. He hits Singleton on the wheel route, wide open. These are routine passes. It's not like everyone was asking Drew Allar to throw these passes into tight windows, into double, triple coverage. And the game could have been a lot worse because when he was throwing it into double and triple coverage, he had 2 interceptions called back. So at the end of the day, when you finish around 50 completion percentage, 12 of 23, 135 yards, and just the 1 interception, it's a lot worse if you're just looking at the box score. Now let's get to the wide receivers, because part of the reason why Drew Allar had as rough of a night as he did, part of his decision making, his comfortability in the game, he just looked uncomfortable all night. He did not settle in on a drive, maybe one or two plays, like I said, that I can pick out and say, hey, we saw Drew Allar do something well here. It was the easy throws. Him not connecting on tight lasers at 25 yards downfield wasn't the issue. It was missing a 5-yard out in the flat to Singleton, or a wide open wheel route that would have been a 90-yard touchdown. The wide receivers were nowhere to be found. So we're talking about Nicholas Singleton being so involved in the passing game here, and the wide receivers, Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, Liam Clifford, Julian Fleming, they were all out there doing cardio, but not a single catch. And then, if you want to look at the ESPN statistics put this out, how they not only did they register 0 receptions collectively, they also had -3 yards because of all the laterals at the end of the game. So it's not even that, oh, they finished with nothing in the box score. No, they finished with something. They finished with -3 yards. Marcus Higgins bears responsibility. Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, Julian Fleming was brought in to be that bridge between the coaching staff to the players. He was supposed to be that player's coach and help them for these moments in the postseason. That wasn't enough. Now, Julian Fleming as a blocker was doing very well, and why Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen did so much better this season. So Julian Fleming held up a good chunk of the bargain, but as a receiver, all of those guys collectively were doing nothing. Tyler Warren had an okay day for his standard. He was okay for his metrics. Everyone else disappointed. And where do you go from here? Because now you're going into year 3 and you see little to no production. Barrett brought up on the live post-game show, and shout out to him. A lot of respect for his work and just his understanding and vision for the game of football, the way that he processes it. And he talked about Keandre Lambert-Smith not being there and how he had 800 yards down at Auburn with Peyton Thorne. I have a feeling that KLS would have at least given them something in this moment now that he brings it up. Again, hindsight's 2020, so I don't need to go into the analysis. Well, what if KLS would have done this or that? But the wide receivers have so many issues. There needs to be some sort of hard reset, because it's more than just recruiting. You do need to develop. And we did not see anything from a Liam Clifford. We did not see anything substantial from a Trey Wallace. He had his moments against really West Virginia. That's the one that comes to mind. But as Tyler Warren took over, the wide receivers continued to disappear. And even still, with all the attention that Tyler Warren gets, the double, the triple coverage, by proxy, the wide receivers should have had the opportunities, and they didn't. Notre Dame dared Penn State to throw it to the wide receivers, and they could not get open in one-on-one coverage, particularly one-on-one press coverage. That's coaching. That's a matter of execution as well. It's a combination of it all. Wide receiver room is getting Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross. I can't sit here and tell you until they get involved in spring football practice just how good they're going to be. But there's a reason that they went after 2 wide receivers now, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go after some more in the spring transfer portal window, especially after this showing. Notre Dame didn't even have its best secondary. Guys were injured. This secondary was supposed to be so much better for Notre Dame, and the wide receivers finished literally with negative yardage. So Drew Allar couldn't help himself in the Orange Bowl against Notre Dame, but also didn't get any other help in the passing game. When he was targeting wide receivers, it was bad. When he was targeting tight ends or running backs, he had somewhat of a decent stat line. I think the stats were 9 of 13 and at least something. But part of the reason that the passing game couldn't get into rhythm, yes, Drew Allar, also the wide receivers. That's the simple analysis of it. But James Franklin, the national perception is that he cannot win the big game. And I would actually not put this on James Franklin at all. or the coordinators. I thought the coaches put together the game plan, the best game plan possible, and it didn't work out. We'll talk about what this means for Franklin, Kotelnicki, and Tom Allen on the other side of this break. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get that peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Are you ready for stress-free taxes and money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Well, the perception's certainly going to stay the same about James Franklin, and my opinion does not change, actually, about James Franklin being Penn State's head coach. I am not on the train of fire James Franklin. It's all his fault. He can't win big games. It's different this time around. And I know I say that, and even though the results are the same. But in the past, Penn State would get extremely outcoached and outmatched. Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State actually put together a solid game plan. And more than just that, I mean, the defense put it all together. I think under the circumstances, Andy Kotelnicki did a lot against a Notre Dame team that at least showed vulnerabilities. This was a Notre Dame defense that looked top 5 for most of the season, all season, and it shows with the statistics, but had certainly the look. And then Penn State knocked them down a few levels in this game with the way that they were able to move the football, especially on the ground. Nicholas Singleton and Kotelnicki Allen, this was a Notre Dame defense that was one of the best at defending the run. And Allen and Singleton were each averaging over almost Singleton himself 5.5 yards per carry, Kotelnicki Allen 4.5 yards per carry. Singleton had 3 touchdowns. The ground game was working. You still were able to get the ball to Tyler Warren as much as possible, and Kotelnicki set up Drew for as much success as possible, and then he just wasn't making the throws. Whatever the reason was, he was not making the throws. So Andy Kotelnicki set up the offense for success as much as possible. Offensive line was getting pushed up front. That's one of the best front sevens in the country, even with the injuries that they are dealing with. And the offensive line did well. Kotelnicki's scheme was working, and Penn State's offense had success. You flip it over to the defense. I don't think Penn State's defense could have performed any better. Oh, but Zach, 27 points against Penn State? No, you have to look at the other statistics here. Notre Dame, this is a top 3 rushing attack. And they were held to 2.8 yards per carry. All season long, they were averaging above 6 yards per carry. Tom Allen and this defense held them to 2.8. They forced 2 interceptions from a veteran in Riley Leonard that just understands college football, that knows how to read a defense. He certainly has his limitations as a passer. Now, he was better than Drew Allar, so I eat my words on that. But Riley Leonard still made costly mistakes, and Penn State's defense, because of the way Tom Allen schemed it, I mean, dropping Deni Dennis Sutton back into coverage, that's Tom Allen right there. So to say, oh, well, if Manny Diaz was there, Tom Allen was a bad hire, that's just wrong. That's just downright wrong. This was a Penn State defense that had 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 turnovers forced, when Notre Dame routinely might surrender a sack or 2, does not turn the football over, and is going to get you 6 to 6.5 yards per carry between Jeremiah Love, those other running backs, and Riley Leonard, and Penn State shut all of that down. The only reason Notre Dame has some of the big plays, those explosive plays, Cam Miller falls down in that instance. He slips the turf monster. You can't have that happen in a national semifinal, but that's where that big play is. And what? Are you supposed to blame Tom Allen for that? Are you supposed to blame Andy Kotelnicki for bad passes and bad throws? Unfortunately, it came down to some poor individual execution at points and times. But the coordinators, in conjunction with James Franklin, typically this is a game where, yeah, James Franklin, he's not going to make the best coaching decisions, but I don't know what you want him to do differently. Notre Dame had taken momentum back. They were able to sneak in a field goal at the end of the first half. They were able to score a touchdown and really set the tone in the third quarter. And then Penn State rattled off 14 unanswered points. That does not happen if James Franklin is getting out-coached. In years past, it absolutely looks like that. They lose a close game, or they're leading by double digits going into the fourth quarter. I think of the games from 2017 and 2018 where that really holds true, where Ohio State is down, by double digits, and Penn State, all they have to do is just use the clock against them, sustain that 2-possession lead, and Ohio State finds a way to come back into it. Notre Dame did not do that, and frankly, Penn State got themselves back in position to tie the game and go and win it. And, James Franklin probably dialed up a pass play. No, that is situational football. You start with one on the ground to see if you can get points here at the end of regulation. I'm really at a loss for words, honestly. James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, and Tom Allen can only control so much. I think they called the game as perfectly as possible. They prepared as well as they could. And it still wasn't enough. Penn State certainly had its limitations that Notre Dame was able to get away with and escape with a victory. Notre Dame escaped with a victory. This was a game that Penn State should have won, and I think that's why it's going to sting and why everybody is going to point the finger and still blame James Franklin, because it starts and ends with him, of course. He is the head coach. But I don't know what you want him to do differently in this situation. I think the program's headed in the right direction. You have consistency. You have Andy Kotelnicki, who's one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. Tom Allen, who's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. James Franklin made those hires. Franklin went out and evaluated those guys as coordinators and brought them in and was able to convince them to say, hey, this is the right spot for you to come work at Penn State. So Franklin deserves credit for that. Same thing with Justin Lustig. James Franklin does a lot of things that people don't give him credit for. And this loss to Notre Dame certainly wasn't his fault, but the program has never been closer. They just have to do some things differently. So what happens next? How's this team going to approach 2025? Because before we know it, winter workouts are going to start right away, and then spring football is just right around the corner. Can Penn State get back to the national semifinals? It's going to be an uphill battle, but they can do some things to put them in a better spot than they presently are. We'll talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5, just $5, and you will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. And if you go over to FanDuel right now, as much as I don't want to talk about it, there is another semifinal game going on. Ohio State is playing Texas, and you can see the lines up on FanDuel. Ohio State is a 5.5-point favorite, minus 240 on the money line. If you're thinking Texas, plus 195. The total is set at 52.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's guaranteed over at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 2025, Penn State will be back in a position to contend for the college football playoff, and there's a lot of what ifs here to see just how good this team can set itself up, because players got to make NFL decisions, and they got to make them rather quickly. There was talk about Drew Allar possibly going off to the NFL and changing his mind. That's got to be off the table. That's got to be off the table now. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen they have decisions to make. I think as far as legitimate decisions go, deny Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant certainly have big decisions to make. Kobe King is somebody that could come back. We already saw Zach Wheatley, and Zach Wheatley, I want to give him a shout out because Zach Wheatley had the best game possible. And I know that doesn't matter in the sense of Penn State didn't win, but Zach Wheatley played the game of his life. 16 tackles. 16. Next closest was Kaiser, the linebacker from Notre Dame, and he had 10. Zach Wheatley is a free safety that's playing center field and typically in coverage. So all of the chatter that Zach Wheatley is not physical, that he can't make tackles, that he's just really good in pass coverage is wrong, or it's a lie, or whatever it is. But 16 tackles in this game, he came to play. He had his best game possible. Also had a sack in there and an interception as well. Zach Wheatley came to play ball. I also want to give Abdul Carter his due respect as well. Abdul Carter left it out on the football field. He did not need to play in this game. He has a clear-cut NFL future. He may have harmed his draft stock in the process because he sustained that injury. I think he helped it because he played through it, showed his toughness, his tenacity, that he was playing with one arm and still had the production that he did. 2 tackles for loss, a sack, pass defense. Riley Leonard, part of the reason he couldn't run anywhere. Abdul Carter shouldn't have even played as many snaps as he did and still had a similar amount of production, even in somewhat of a limited role. It wasn't as limited as I thought it would be, but he played more than I could have imagined in this game. Abdul Carter now goes from conservatively a top 15 pick where, yeah, he's got a lot of potential to now you got to take him in the top 5. This is a guy that will give you everything and then some. He has the talent to back it up. He's so versatile. You want him at defensive end, you want him at linebacker. Abdul Carter really actually helped his draft stock by playing through the injury. Now, where does this team go? Where does this team go defensively? Because I think there are a lot of big question marks with how does Drew handle this? Singleton and Allen, can you get one of them back? Are you getting both of them back? Like Pat McAfee said, wide receivers need an absolute reset. Tyler Warren is gone. How do you replace that production? That was a Heisman. But Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton, Kobe King, if you can get them to come back, you put yourself as Penn State in a position to contend for the Big Ten Conference again, contend for a college football playoff spot, and not just be somebody fringe that sneaks in with an at-large bid at that 10, 11, or 12 seed. No, you can certainly be a team that contends for a bye. That can be, I don't know about the number 1, number 2, 3, right out of the gate. Oh, they're a number 1 team, they're a number 2 team. But to start the season, Penn State could easily be the 5th, 6th, 7th best team to start and honestly finish there. The schedule is not, it's going to be challenging. I wouldn't say that it's overly a gauntlet or anything like that, but they get a bye. They play Oregon. They also get a bye again, and they play Ohio State. So there are certainly some things that can help them out in logistically that just give them, it's not easy. It is not easy to play Ohio State, but I'm saying it helps that you have a bye week there for one of the biggest games of the season. It helps that you have a bye week before Oregon as one of your biggest games of the season. You get that continuity with the coaching staff. Look, it is safe to assume that Drew Allar is going to get better. They bring in Kyron Hudson. They bring in Devontae Ross. They each give you something unique. Kyron Hudson can catch anything that's thrown his way. Separation is still a question mark, but he can catch just about any football. His catching ability is off the charts. Devontae Ross gives you speed, gives you a lot of speed. I don't think Penn State's work is finished in the transfer portal at wide receiver. Luke Reynolds is going to get better. Khalil Dinkins is going to get better. The offensive line, aside from Sal Wormley, should return everybody. Nolan Rucci was playing out of his mind in this postseason. It looked great. Looked like that 5-star offensive tackle. So the biggest question marks about this are, where is your base? Where are you starting? Are you getting Dennis Sutton back? Zane Durant, Kobe King? Are you getting, Cam Miller, Zion Tracy, right? There are a lot of veterans that are going to come back and be serious contributors next season. But the guys that have the NFL decisions really make or break this conversation. If Dennis Sutton, Durant, King, Singleton, and Allen all go off to the NFL to join a Carter, to join a Warren. That's going to make this really more of an uphill battle. But if you get lucky, if you're Penn State, or if you're competitive with NIL, maybe that's a reason that not a lot of players have been coming through the transfer portal, because they are keen on keeping their base, their foundation, and focusing NIL, kind of like Ohio State did. JT Tuimoloau, Denzel Burke. And now I know I'm rambling a little bit here. My point is that there's a lot of NFL talent that could have gone off at last year's draft and had been selected in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and did not, and stayed because they were competitive and strategic with their NIL. Maybe Penn State can do the same thing here with Singleton, Allen, Dennis Sutton, Kobe King, Zane Durant. They have a lot of players. And then they already added Anai White, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. Penn State's at least going in the right direction. It's a moral victory. I know everybody's probably still reeling here from Penn State versus Notre Dame. And that's a historical matchup. I was entertained. I was certainly on pins and needles the whole time. That's why college football is some of the best. And I hate to see that it's at the expense of the team that I cover, the team that I graduated from, Penn State. Yeah, that certainly doesn't make it a lot of fun, but the atmosphere, what was on the line, Penn State can get back there. They're in the right spot, and James Franklin is the right coach to do that. That's where I'll wrap it up here. We're certainly going to have more conversations, get your questions, your reactions throughout. And we're still going to talk about football. We're going to talk about basketball. We're going to talk about wrestling. It's your team every day here on Locked On Nittany Lions. That's why it's called Locked On Nittany Lions. If you're new to the show, please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.